Welcome to the Idea Climbing Podcast. Community engagement and content marketing go hand in hand if you have the right strategies. I discuss how to combine the two in this episode with my guest, Behdad Jamshidi. In the past 6 years, Behdad, or B, has met with and assessed over 992 marketing agencies and vetted them down to a lean 100 plus preferred partners across all marketing niches. After pairing hundreds of businesses with the right partners, he's found his skill set lies in the matchmaking process. We dive into topics such as how to come up with fresh content for content marketing, how to choose the right communities to get involved with when you're getting started, how to maintain a high level of meaningful, valuable content over time, and more golden nuggets of advice. You're going to love this show. Hello, B. Thank you for joining me on the Idea Climbing Podcast. I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we're going to talk about combining community engagement with content marketing, some of the structures, the strategies, ways you can combine both of them to get amazing results in your business as an entrepreneur. Before we get into the tactics, tips, and tricks, as far as community engagement and content strategy, how did you get so good at it? What's your story there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So just for context, like I ended up kind of getting into the marketing connection space. So I basically help connect businesses with the right marketing partners. And a lot of the way that I kind of got into this space was through engaging with different communities. Like during COVID, everything kind of hit and everyone flushed into online communities. And so in one of the specific communities that I was in, that's kind of how I built up my brand name and I got tons of customers from it. And it was just by like just sharing knowledge and sharing information within that community where people started to get to know me over the course of 1, 2, 3 years. And that's kind of how I kind of got into that space, very luckily. And it was more just because my personality was to always value share. I love sharing ideas. I love sharing content. And then as I was getting customers from it, I was like, oh, interesting. This is an interesting marketing strategy. It actually works because I'm not trying to sell. I'm just trying to add value. And then people will DM you because of that.
What kind of value, what kind of content were you adding to add value when you got started in communities like that?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was just a lot around like business type stuff. Like, hey, this is kind of what I'm going through in business. This is how I think. Or if I came up with like a new idea or new thought, right? As you're growing in a business, you're always just learning more and more, whether it's from like mentors around you, other business owners. And so I realized that like not everyone gets access to that. Not everyone likes to network at the level that I like to network at. So the concepts and ideas that would come up in those conversations, I would just basically then take it, journal it, and then from that journal, I would just basically create content posts. So there was things around like, hey, here's the mistakes that businesses make when they're trying to pick the right marketing partner. But then there was like, hey, I'm about to hire a business coach. What should I think about? And then even after that, it's like, I hired the business coach. Here's what I learned. And so you kind of create this like continuity of like personal and business within that community.
How many calls a week would you make to get research done like that?
I just always had calls, right? Like I'm a super connector in the marketing space, so I'm always on calls anyway. So it's just a byproduct of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go to different like networking events and stuff as well. And those networking events were kind of like local, right? So you'd meet different business owners and things like that. So that's where a lot of like the content would come from. And not to mention, like I used to be an engineer. I used to do sales engineering, and a big part of what I used to do is I worked with businesses that were anywhere from like 50 to 1,000 type employee range. So I got a lot of content, a lot of knowledge just from like my past work experience that I could share with the audience because most entrepreneurs or most people that are running those entrepreneurship businesses haven't worked in like large organizations, right? Like they're starting from ground zero up, or they just been doing it for 10 to 15 years. So you come in with this insight that like others don't have. And anyone that's like a solopreneur and has a full-time job working for any type of company that has structure, like you have content that you could share.
So with the content that you share to get started in the community, what advice do you have for getting their attention? Because I know in some communities, whether it's a Facebook group or a standalone community on a website, there's a lot of conversations going on. What do you do to stand out when you get involved?
Yeah, I mean, you got to find out like what your like core thing is, like what you like to talk about. So you can even start off easy, like, hey, this is who I am. This is a little bit of my background. Here's the stuff that I love talking about. Here's the stuff that I can support people on in the future. Like just being super like just open with it and not trying to like land calls, right? Like just kind of share from the heart of who you are. And then the next piece after is like, what do you know that you think most people don't know, right? And then just build out posts around that. So for me, it was just like, hey, like a lot of it was like I was just seeing businesses constantly failing with marketing partners. So I would constantly be like, what's happening here? Like what's breaking? And how can I like provide that feedback into the community? And so that's where a lot of my content started out was just like what I was doing. But you could talk about a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, I don't know, like what do you do, for example? Like what could you talk about within a community that no one else could talk about?
Podcasting as a networking tool has been a popular one where I've been guests on other podcasts. It's not just the downloads, it's the relationships you build, relationship marketing, build meaningful relationships. Take some time up front. It does take more time, but you also have trusted advisors and trusted relationships that are going to give you business in the long run. It's things like that that I like to talk about, that it's not the quick fix, it's about the relationship.
There you go. And I just kind of got an idea there. It's like, hey, I've done over 60 different podcasts. Here's the results and what happened, and here's the way that I did it. And I could break that into two posts to be like, here's the results, and then the next one, the next week would be here's how I did it. Right? Like there's two posts right there.
That's awesome. So when you get into the community, you start getting attention. Instead of just being a blip on their radar, how do you keep attention once you start getting it in communities so you don't just disappear and fall off the face of the earth?
Yeah, I think you just have to find the cadence that works for you. So for me, it's like every 2 weeks I'll post in different communities. So in the back end, I basically have this like Excel sheet where it's like, here's all the different communities that I'm in, here's the content that I'm writing, and here's where this content actually fits. Right. And so every 2 weeks I'll go in, I'll post in the communities, and then I'll just engage like, as people comment or make comments on my post, I'll respond to them. Right. And I'll add more to it. The other thing is like you don't always need to post. Like if you're in within a community and you think the community is valuable, like rank it, right? Like rank it from 1 to 5. And, 5 is like super important. This community really matters. It has my target market in there. I have friends in there. Put attention into those communities. So like go in once every 1 or 2 days and see if there's something you can comment on and actually genuinely add value. So it doesn't have to just be like content you post and then you disappear, but it could
Mhm.
also be like, oh, other people are commenting on things. I'll make posts in there. And how you got to think about that is like each one of those is a node, right? Like every time you post a comment in one of those channels, other people are going to look at that post a year later and start reaching out, right? Like there's so many people that reached out to me just because I've commented on other people's posts as well. So it's a mix of like your own content and also showing up in people's comments and just genuinely adding value. And over time, you'll start noticing like people will start recognizing who you are within the community.
Is there a number or a metric as far as how many communities should you be involved with when you get started? That's probably the best thing to ask. How many communities, if there is a number, should you try to get involved with when you're just getting started with the strategy?
I mean, that's a great question. It's just how much can you really take on? But I wouldn't start off with more than three. Like try to find three solid ones and put a lot of your attention into those and see if it works. So you might have to go into 10 or 15 different groups initially and then go, okay, these are the three that I want to focus on initially and just start building those reps in. And then as you build the system out for how to engage in those communities, you can start adding another one in and another one in. And you'll start noticing that like as your business grows or as your network grows, other people are going to recommend other communities to you. So that finding of the new communities is going to be easier each time that you try to find another one because people are just going to tell you which ones make most sense.
I love what you said about have a system to engage. Could you unpack that a little bit? What is a system? What is your system? What does it look like?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about systems because I'm an engineer in a
Yeah.
marketing world. So everything I try to do is I try to systematize things. So for me, it's like, let's say I'm going into community, the next level of my system, like right now I'm posting every 2 weeks into different communities and leaving comments. But I want to think about, okay, every time I join a new community, I want to have like 5 posts that I put out that establish like a solid foundation within the community of who I am and what I do, right? And so that's going to be part of the system so that I don't have to think about like, oh, what are we going to post in this community? We know we joined a new one. These are the 5 things that we're going to be posting. And then you want to build a system around, okay, we know we have all these different communities, but they have different target markets, right? Like some communities might be around M&A, some might just be around business owners wanting to connect on a relationship level. And so not all content is going to work within each community. So when you're building your system out, you're actually finding ways of tagging different posts for which communities it should go in based on what those communities are about so that your message doesn't just kind of get lost or just like mistargeted, if that makes sense.
So how do you pick a target market? What's that based on? How do you pick the ideal target market?
I mean, this is like the foundations of like brand strategy and marketing, right? Like figuring out who your ICP is. So you got to sit down and go like, who are the people that I want to be my customers, right? Who are they? How big are they? Where are they spending time? Are they married? Do they have kids? What are they spending their time on? Are they on Spotify? Are they on LinkedIn? Like, what are they listening to? Like, you want to understand who your target market is and who they are by understanding who they are as a person. And then from there, when you're writing content to that person, right? And that's typically how you got to go through it. So there are different ways online that you can figure out your ICP. There's
What's
worksheets
an
and things like that.
ICP?
Oh, your ideal customer profile.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can search for that on Google and then just go through the bunch of questions and at least get like a foundational baseline of who you're targeting. It's going to really help you to get your messaging down within those communities or even what communities you should join.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you pick a community based on the ICP, or is there a little bit of testing there where you could figure out your ICP because of the response in the community? Is it a chicken and the egg? What comes first?
I mean, it could be a mix of both. Like if you're starting out on your entrepreneurship journey and you want trying to figure out what makes sense, what resonates, like you could start with the approach of like I'm just going to post out content around this specific thing and see if it ideally attracts anyone. Usually you'll get some hits, you'll take some learning from that. But once you get like honed in on like I know who my ideal customer profile is, then you're going to start looking for communities around that. And then that way you're building content for those specific things. So let's say I'm focused on like M&A and I want to be in M&A groups. Like I'm just going to go into M&A groups and I'm going to write content around like buying and selling businesses and how it ties to marketing, for example, right? That's kind of how I would think about it. But if you have your ICP, you're going to be much more targeted and focused on the way down a certain path. If you're still in the phase where you're like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I just want to start like building a little bit of a brand around the things that I like to talk about, then you can just start shoot from the hip and just see kind of what resonates and what doesn't.
So once you find your ICP, you have the initial launch, I guess the launch system, if you'll call it that. You're past that. You found your communities. How do you keep humming along? What
Yeah.
does a system look like after you've already discovered this stuff?
Well, I mean, like you're constantly just seeing what people want to hear from you, right? So in one community, for example, I got to a point where I was like, I wonder what they want to hear from me. Like they know me well enough. They know that I talk about these different things. So I literally just had a post and said like, hey, you guys know my background. This is what I've done. I've done marketing. I've read this many books and I've done engineering. What do you want me to post on? Like, what are you curious about? And I had a lot of people like respond back to like, we're actually interested in the journey of like how you went from being an engineer to being like a marketing connector and how you made that switch. Like, how did you do that? And so a bunch of my like next posts were just me sharing my story of how I made that transition into running my business. So like that's one way you can literally ask your audience in that community at that point, like, what do you want me to post? The other things that I typically like doing in communities, which we haven't hit on, is like I like to go to the events. Like if I have the opportunity to go to an event and it's close enough, like initially it'd just be like events that are within a city. But now, like for example, I joined a recent community and they have a Mexico event. So I booked a Mexico ticket to go down and meet people in that community because I'm like, that's the best way to get in front of people, make one-on-one connections so that next time you see something in that community, like, oh, that guy knows me or I know him. And it's just such a deeper connection and it helps kind of fast track your like relationship within that community.
So you start making a lot of connections. You're building a reputation. People are getting to know you. You're humming along. What do you do without being too salesy? How do you convert conversations and connections into clients?
So my method for that is just being fully value add. I don't even have call to actions on the bottom of my like posts within communities. I don't, that's not it. Like I'm just literally here, like I'm here to share a bunch of knowledge with you. And as I do that, like people just automatically will reach out. Like, so go in with the intention of like you actually want to share information and you want to share it with people and add value. And I think the returns kind of come from themselves. Like, don't be so focused on like what call to action do I need. It's very different than like when you're running like content on LinkedIn, for example, where you're writing a bunch of stuff and you're like comment this and you'll get this lead magnet, for example. You don't do that in communities. It's more about the value add.
Explain more. How does content become valuable? I mean, is it from the research or feedback you get that you're only not only, but mostly talking about the problems they have and how they can solve them? What does that look like without a lead magnet?
Yeah, so think about it in terms of like, okay, what is my customer really struggling with, right? So for me, for example, it's like a lot of businesses really struggle with finding marketing partners the first time. And so when I kind of talk about it, it's like, hey, I know as a business owner, it's really hard to find marketing partners that you trust. And typically you're going to 3 to 5 of them, spending 2 years to do that. And at the end of the day, you just want to focus on like the strategy aspect of your business and not trying to find the right partners in place. It's the same as always trying to get like when you have like B employees, but you really want the A players because the A players are going to move the needle forward. Here's the 3 things that I would do to make sure I'm finding A players when it comes to marketing partners that I'm working with. And then list the 3 things. And the guy's going, oh, I definitely feel that. oh, these are actually tips that I've never actually thought about before. Maybe I should talk to this guy because it seems like he knows what he's talking about and might be able to help me find the right partners, right? So that's kind of how you think about it.
So with marketing partners, I think that's interesting. How do you foster marketing partner relationships? Because I do referral partners, marketing partners, whatever you want to call it. It takes time, and it's not everyone. How do you notice them in the first place, and then foster those relationships so you know there's an ROI on your time to build a relationship with a marketing or referral partner? What do you do?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I've talked to over 975 of them at this point, so I get a pretty good read in the first 30 minutes of talking to different marketing agencies and experts. Because you've talked to so many, so you kind of classify them. You go, oh, this is this type of agency that just wants to grow and sell, or it's this type of agency that they're like scaling, but they're like breaking at the seams. So there's all these different things that I kind of have in my head where I like classify the partners that come in. And so for me, I'm always looking for people that have been around long enough. They have well established like processes and systems. They have a good like client roster and people that actually like working with them. And if I have not heard any bad things about them and the web of agencies that I know and partners that I know, and a lot of agencies like finding the right agencies or experts, they're typically found in layers, right? Like just consider like layer one is like Google, right? Like you have the Google, you have the market hires of the world, you have the Upwork. I consider that all layer one type services. But then there's like the layer two where it's like, okay, I've already vetted a partner. They're at level two. I know they're good. And when I'm asking for a recommendation from them, they're giving me someone. So let's say I'm working with a fractional CMO and they're like, hey, B, we've worked with this creative agency and we know they're good. Or we've worked with this website agency. We know they're good because we've used them on 5 projects. And so those are kind of like level three relationships that I get introed into. And at that point, I'm going, okay, someone else has used you within my network. They've talked really highly about you. Now I'm just going to go look at the facts and make sure what you're actually good at and which industries and which types of customers you're good at, and then end up matching that way. And so to answer your question, it's hard because it's like you need to build out networks to get into those types of circles and finding those types of agencies because
Mhm.
typically their websites are not very good. They get customers through referrals. That's how most agencies build to like the 7 or 8 figure range. And so they're not spending time on their own marketing, which is kind of funny. But they're just busy enough with referrals. And a tip for like solopreneurs, like if you're in different business groups, like you can get to like the level two type thing because you can get to the level two type connections by asking other business owners who they've used, right? Just because they've used that marketing partner for their business doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but at least it's going to be more vetted than trying to get someone that's like coming out from nowhere.
So when you start to get referrals, people start coming to you when it comes to getting a client and not doing it sales, like you said, there's not the call to action, a typical sales funnel, things like that. What does that conversation, what is the tipping point conversation when you know they're interested in you? What does a sales conversation look like at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Once people hit your DMs and they're like, "Hey, I'm interested in chatting with you," they've already made the decision to like basically work with you. So the next piece is like, "Hey, would love to have a conversation. Let's jump on a 30-minute call." For me, if it's like someone where I'm like, the business might be too small for what I do, I'll typically ask some questions up front, like, "Hey, what are you trying to do? Tell me a little bit of a background of your business, how long you've been around for, and like, what are you looking to do? Like, I'm looking to do this in marketing. I'm like, do you have this type of budget to even do something like that? And if the answer is like no, then I'm like, maybe that's a consulting session because I don't think you're ready for the thing that you're trying to do.
Mhm.
But then if everything looks good, then it's like, okay, let's just jump on a 30-minute call. Let's learn a little bit more about that. And then you go through your typical sales process, right?
So it sounds like even if they're DMing you and they're coming to you, you have to qualify. That's a little bit different than, oh, they came to me, they must want to buy. You qualify them and don't assume that they're ready to buy. Is that right? There's a qualification stage between their DMing you and closing a sale.
100%. Yeah. So for me, it's like really important to be jumping on calls that like make sense because my calendar is very, very full all the time. And so it becomes like an opportunity cost. So I think as a solopreneur, if you're running a business, like yes, you can jump on calls with clients. But if they're not the right fit, that's an opportunity cost because you can be focusing on something else. So I always like to do a little bit of qualifying up front to make sure that it like that call is going to be useful. One for the customer that's going to be talking to me, and I actually have good advice for them. And two, for me, vice versa, to be like I can actually help you because you have the right budget in place. Otherwise, it's a waste of time for both parties.
So once you get the clients, how do you turn happy clients into referral partners?
Yeah, so there's a model where I basically if I have a customer that works with one of my agencies, typically I'm checking in at 2 or 3 months and say like, hey, how's that relationship going? Are things going well? And if things are going well, the next piece is, can you get a review? And then after the review, you ask, hey, is there anyone else that you can introduce me to that may want to talk to me that runs a business, right? And so you can build out a system around that so that you're building a referral system of your customers like actively trying to introduce you into people. That's one way.
Do you find are your customers, do you find them to be receptive to becoming referral partners, or how do you walk that path so it's not like, oh, give me a client, give me a client, give me a client? What does that look like as far as the receptivity, if that's the right word for it, of them saying, oh, of course, I'd love to help, I'd love to refer you business? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways. Most clients, if they've liked working with you, they're pretty receptive to it, right? Like if you've helped them and you've helped their business grow, like why would they not want to introduce other people into that, right? So customers are receptive to it, but you have to ask in a nice way. It's like, hey, we've done some work together. I was able to help you find a really good partner. If you found what I did valuable, is there anyone that you would want to forward an email intro into? And then you can even give them the intro. It's like, hey, I met B. He was a marketing connector. We hired this specific person from him. Would you like an intro and just have a chat with him? Like it's just like a not a very hard sales pitch. Like I'm not there to network and meet people.
Mhm.
That's the way that I run my like sales side of things. Like I like to come in with value first and build relationships rather than just trying to be like a transactional sale. Like for example, just today, I had a customer of mine that I helped 5 months ago, and I checked in with him like at 2 months, and then I checked in with him at the beginning of the year just to see how the project was going and things were going well. And now he's like, "Hey, I'm at a stage where I actually want to like take this specific business. Can we run Google Ads or SEO or do something to kind of help that grow?" And we literally just finished a call today, so I'm helping him find like a Google Ads partner when I've already helped him find like a website development partner for his other 3 websites.
That is awesome. And we have covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. When it comes to community engagement, blending it with content marketing, someone watching or listening is like, okay, I love a lot of the things that you said. I want to get rolling with this. I want to make this happen. If you were to say, at least do this one thing above all else, at least do this the right way, what would you tell people to do when it comes to that community engagement and content marketing strategy?
Man, just get 3 communities that you're a part of, write one post, and then just post it. Don't even build a system, just post it and just see kind of what happens and see what kind of feedback you get. And just don't be disengaged or upset if it doesn't get a ton of likes, but you don't know. Maybe you'll get a ton of likes around the thing that you're trying to share. So that would be my first tip. Just get into it.
Excellent, B. And if people want to find you online, where's the best place or places to go?
The best place is to go to www.cjammarketing.com. That's how you can get in contact with me, or just follow me on my LinkedIn at Behdad Jamshidi. You write that in LinkedIn, and you can find me on there.
Excellent. Thanks again. This has been awesome.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
And scene.